Some betrayals do not knock on your door. Mine came through a phone call from an elementary school secretary who told me my grandson had written a letter begging them not to let his mother find out he still remembered me. 2 hours after that call, my daughter-in-law stood on my front porch in a cream-colored coat I knew I had helped pay for, looked past me into the house my late wife had loved, and said, "You have until Friday to sign the papers, Walter. After that, we'll let the court decide whether you're fit to be around him." She thought the threat would break me. She thought being 73 meant I was tired enough to surrender. But what Marissa did not know was that the letter from that frightened little boy was not the first document with his name on it. And it was not the most dangerous one. My name is Walter James Hollis. I am 73 years old, retired from the United States Army Corps of Engineers, and I have lived most of my life just outside Franklin, Tennessee, on a ridge road that cuts between cattle pasture, cedar trees, and the kind of quiet people move to town to find after they have spent too many years chasing noise. For 36 years, I was a civil engineer. Bridges, retaining walls, drainage systems, flood studies, county road repairs. I was the man they called when the ground shifted or the water went where it was not supposed to go. Before that, I wore a uniform, learned discipline the hard way, and came home from places where silence meant survival. I built my life slowly, not perfectly, slowly. My wife, Eleanor, used to say I was the kind of man who would measure twice before buying a cup of coffee. She was not wrong. I kept receipts in envelopes. I stored warranties in labeled folders. I wrote down mileage in little notebooks and saved every tax bill from the day we bought our first acre. That carefulness annoyed people when I was young. It saved me when I was old. Eleanor and I raised one son, Daniel. We wanted more children, but life does not always listen to what a couple wants. After 2 miscarriages and 1 surgery that left Eleanor crying quietly in our bathroom with the faucet running, we stopped talking about a bigger family and poured everything we had into the one boy God gave us. Daniel was bright when he was young, restless, handsome in that careless way boys are when they do not understand what love has cost their parents. He could take apart a lawnmower before he could drive. He could also lie with a straight face by the time he was 12, which worried Eleanor more than it worried me. "He wants the reward without the wait," she told me once, watching him from the kitchen window as he abandoned a half-raked yard to ride his bike toward town. I laughed it off back then. A father can ignore a warning when it comes dressed as a child. Daniel grew up, went to Middle Tennessee State, dropped out after 3 semesters, went back, dropped out again, sold cars for a while, tried insurance, tried roofing, tried real estate wholesaling, tried selling online courses about financial freedom before he had any of his own. Then he met Marissa Caldwell. She was beautiful. I will not pretend otherwise. Tall, polished, sharp-eyed, with blonde hair always curled just enough to look effortless, and a smile that arrived half a second after she decided it would be useful. She came from Brentwood money, or at least she spoke as if she did. Her father had owned a chain of urgent care clinics before a partner dispute tore the business apart. Her mother taught her early that appearances were not everything. They were the only thing. Eleanor tried to like her. I tried harder. When Daniel brought Marissa to Sunday supper the first time, she complimented Eleanor's chicken casserole, then asked if the kitchen was original to the house in a tone that made original sound like a diagnosis. She walked through our living room looking at the pine floors, the old framed army photograph, the shelves of hardback books, the quilt Eleanor's grandmother made, and I could see her calculating value without understanding worth. Still, she made Daniel stand straighter. She got him to keep a job. She pushed him to finish his real estate license. I thought maybe that counted for something. They married in May of 2009 under a white tent at a vineyard outside Arrington. Eleanor wore a blue dress and cried when Daniel danced with her. I remember that because by then her hands had started trembling in the mornings, and she kept one hand tucked against Daniel's shoulder so no one would notice. 3 years later, our grandson was born, Evan Thomas Hollis. I have known strong feelings in my life: fear, pride, grief, shame. But nothing ever hit me like the first time that little boy wrapped 5 pink fingers around my thumb. He had Daniel's eyes and Eleanor's chin. When he cried, Eleanor hummed, "You are my sunshine," into his hair and looked at me like the whole world had been repaired. For the first 6 years of Evan's life, he practically lived between our house and theirs. Daniel and Marissa bought a new build place in Spring Hill, With a mortgage, I warned them, was too big. They smiled the way young people smile when old people mention debt. So Evan came to us when Daniel worked late, when Marissa had Pilates, when they traveled, when they fought, when they wanted weekends, when daycare closed, when life got inconvenient. I did not mind. Eleanor did not just love that boy. She studied him. She knew which peanut butter he liked, which dinosaur names he mispronounced, which storms scared him, which stories he wanted twice. She kept a drawer in the kitchen with washable markers, glue sticks, construction paper, and little plastic animals. Every Friday, Evan and I walked down to the creek behind the barn and looked for flat stones. He called me Granddad Walt. He called Eleanor Nana Son. Because of the song. The property where all this happened was called Cedar Hollow, though the county records listed it plainly as 18.7 acres and residential improvements. Williamson County, parcel 09417-006. To me, it was not a parcel. It was the place where Eleanor and I had learned to be poor without becoming bitter. It was a white farmhouse with green shutters, a detached workshop, a red barn leaning just slightly to the east, 2 hay fields leased to a neighbor, a spring-fed creek, and a line of cedar trees that turned black against the sunset. We bought the first 7 acres in 1984 with a VA loan, an old truck, and more confidence than money. The house was drafty, the roof leaked. The back porch sagged so badly a marble would roll toward the steps. Eleanor waited tables at a meat and 3 restaurant, while I worked county contracts during the day and repaired the house at night. She planted hydrangeas along the porch before we owned a proper couch. Over time, we added land piece by piece. A widow sold us 5 acres because she trusted Eleanor. A farmer sold us the lower pasture after his knees gave out. The little triangular strip by Miller Creek came from a tax sale I only attended because Eleanor said, "Someday our grandchildren might want to run all the way down to the water without crossing somebody else's fence." She was right. She usually was. By the time property values around Franklin exploded, Cedar Hollow was worth more than any 2 old people who still clipped coupons had expected. Developers called. Realtors mailed glossy postcards. Men in boots and expensive watches knocked on my door and talked about highest and best use, while standing on ground where my wife had buried 3 dogs and 1 jar of letters she wrote to the babies we lost. I told every one of them no. Eleanor and I did talk about what would happen after us. We were not foolish. Daniel was our only child. Evan was our only grandchild. But by 2017, Marissa had started making remarks. Not open demands. Not yet. Just little sentences dropped like crumbs. "This property is a lot for you 2 to maintain. Land taxes are only going up. Daniel really should understand the estate plan. You know, Walter, a living trust avoids so much mess." She was not wrong about the trust. That was what made her dangerous. Greedy people often carry enough truth to hide the hook. Eleanor heard it too. One evening in October of 2018, after Evan had gone home and Daniel had driven away too fast down our gravel lane, Eleanor stood by the kitchen sink and said, "She is not waiting for us to die, Walt. She is waiting for us to become manageable." I looked up from the property tax notice. "What do you mean?" She dried her hands slowly. "I mean, she sees love as access." That sentence stayed with me. 6 months later, Eleanor was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia. If you have never watched someone you love become a house with lights going out room by room, there is no language for it. She still knew me most days. Then some days she thought I was my father. Some mornings she woke up and asked if the baby had moved. Some evenings she stood in the hallway with her purse in her hand, saying she needed to get to the restaurant before her shift started, though the restaurant had closed 20 years earlier. Daniel visited less after the diagnosis. Marissa visited more. That was when I began documenting. Not because I planned revenge. I was still naive enough to hope for decency. I documented because the Army taught me memory is not evidence, and engineering taught me the thing that fails is usually the thing nobody inspected. Eleanor had good days, Hes. On those days, we met with an estate attorney named Ruth Ann Bledsoe. Her office sat above a pharmacy on Main Street in downtown Franklin, with narrow stairs, old brick walls, and a conference table that had probably heard every family secret in Williamson County. Ruth Ann was 61, silver-haired, dry as January, and not easily charmed. She had handled my mother's estate years before. She knew the difference between a careful man and a paranoid one. Over 4 meetings, Eleanor and I created the Hollis Family Preservation Trust. Not a simple will, not a handshake promise. A trust. Cedar Hollow went into it. but not the way Daniel assumed. The farmhouse and the original 7 acres remained for my lifetime use. The lower pasture and creek land were placed under a conservation restriction with the Harpeth Land Conservancy, preventing subdivision without court approval. The workshop and barn were assigned separate use conditions. A small commercial lot I had quietly purchased near Columbia years earlier, back when land was cheap and nobody wanted it, went into a separate subtrust. That commercial lot was the secret. Eleanor called it Evans Bridge. In 1996, I had helped design drainage near a neglected industrial strip south of Columbia. I noticed one corner lot stayed dry while everything around it flooded. I bought it for $28,000 from a bank that wanted it off their books. For years it sat there, fenced and ugly, producing nothing but tax bills. Daniel never knew about it because there had been no reason to tell him. Then, the county widened the road, then a medical group built nearby, then a logistics company bought land across the highway. By 2021, that ugly little lot was worth more than Cedar Hollow's house. Eleanor and I decided that if Daniel lived with patience, responsibility, and respect, he would receive income from the trust after my death. Evan would receive educational support, health support, and eventually ownership benefits when he turned 30. But if anyone attempted to force a sale, conceal a grandchild from a trustee, claim incompetence without medical basis, or interfere with my right to occupy Cedar Hollow, an in terra rem clause would limit that person to $1. Ruth Ann made us say it out loud. $1, she said, tapping the paper. Not because the court likes drama, Walter. Because it proves you considered them and intentionally limited them. Eleanor's hand shook as she signed. Then she asked Ruth Ann to prepare one more document. A letter, not a legal instrument exactly. A notarized statement of intent. Her words, her signature, her mind on one of her clearest days, witnessed by Ruth Ann, her paralegal, and Dr. Samuel Keene, the neurologist who had evaluated her capacity that morning. I did not read the letter then. Eleanor sealed it in a blue envelope and wrote, "For when they forget what family means." She died on February 11, 2022, at 4:38 in the morning, while rain tapped against our bedroom window and my hand rested on hers. Even was 9. At the funeral, he tucked a folded drawing into her casket. It showed him, me, and Nana's son standing under a yellow circle, with rays shooting everywhere. Marissa told him not to cry too loudly because people are watching. That should have been the moment I understood. Grief makes fools of even careful men. After Eleanor died, the house became too quiet. I kept her sweater on the back of the kitchen chair for 6 months. I brewed 2 cups of coffee every morning for almost 3 weeks before I stopped catching myself. Evan still came over after school twice a week at first. We walked to the creek, we made grilled cheese. He sat in Eleanor's rocking chair and asked questions children should never have to ask. Does Nana's son know when I miss her? I think love leaves an echo, I told him. So yes, then visits became complicated. Marissa said Evan had tutoring, then soccer, then allergies. Then he was tired. Then Daniel stopped answering my calls until the next day. The first Thanksgiving after Eleanor passed. They came for exactly 52 minutes. Marissa brought store-bought rolls still in the plastic container and kept checking her phone. Daniel looked thinner. Evan hugged me hard, then glanced back at his mother like he had done something wrong. When I handed him a small carved wooden bird I had made in the workshop, Marissa said, "We're trying to reduce clutter." Evan put it in his coat pocket anyway. By spring of 2023, I was seeing him maybe once every 6 weeks. By Christmas, not at all. I called, I texted, I sent birthday cards, I mailed him books. Some were returned unopened. Not all. That detail mattered later. Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because this story still follows me every time I sit on that porch. On January 8, 2025, at 10:14 in the morning, my phone rang while I was in the workshop sharpening a plane blade. The caller ID said Clover Ridge Elementary. I almost let it go because I did not recognize the number. Then something in me tightened. This is Walter Hollis. A woman's voice said, "Mr. Hollis, my name is Angela Porter. I'm the school counselor at Clover Ridge Elementary. Do you have a moment?" I set the blade down. "Yes, Mom." There was a pause. Professional people use pauses when they are deciding how much truth the policy allows. "Your grandson Evan Hollis wrote a letter as part of a classroom assignment. His teacher brought it to me because it raised some concerns. Your name and phone number were included." My hand closed around the edge of the workbench. "Is Evan hurt?" "Not physically, no. Those words did not comfort me. What did the letter say? Another pause. I can't read the entire letter over the phone without following procedure, but he wrote that he misses you. He wrote that he is not allowed to call you. He wrote that he was told you were angry with him because of something his grandmother left him. And he wrote. Her voice softened. He wrote, "If Granddad Walt calls, please don't tell Mom," I asked. The workshop changed around me. The cedar boards, the tools, the winter light on the concrete floor. Everything sharpened. I said, "May I come to the school? We can schedule a meeting, but because you're not listed as an approved pickup or guardian contact this year, I need to be careful." I wanted first to verify that this phone number belonged to the person he identified. "I understand." "Mr. Hollis," she said quietly, "Evan included your address from memory." I closed my eyes. Children remember the places where they felt safe. Angela Porter told me she would document the incident, and that if there were concerns of emotional harm, the school had reporting obligations. She did not accuse. She did not promise. She was careful. I respected careful. When we hung up, I walked into the house, washed my hands, put on a clean flannel shirt, and opened the fireproof file cabinet in the small room. Eleanor had called my paper cave. There are moments in life when rage tries to make you loud, discipline makes you useful. I pulled the trust binder. I pulled the communication log I had kept since April 2022. I pulled copies of returned mail, screenshots of unanswered texts, birthday card receipts, photographs from Evan's earlier visits, and the folder Ruth Ann had labeled Grandchild Access Contingency. Then I sat at the kitchen table beneath Eleanor's old copper light fixture and read every page again. By noon, I called Ruth Ann. She answered on the third ring. "Walter." I had not spoken yet, but she knew. "Evan wrote a letter at school," I said. "Bring everything." That was all. The second phone call came that evening. Daniel called at 6:42 p.m. I remember because I was standing on the back porch watching fog settle over the lower pasture. His name appeared on the screen, and for one foolish second I thought maybe he was calling because he had learned what Evan wrote and felt ashamed. "Dad," he said, rushed and breathless. "We need to talk about the house." Not Evan, the house. I looked out at the cedar trees Eleanor had loved. "What about it?" "Marissa and I have been talking. This property is too much for you. The taxes, upkeep, liability. You're out there alone. It's not safe." I let the silence work. He filled it, as people do when they know they are wrong. "We met with someone, a broker. Just informally. There's serious interest in the area. Dad, the market is still strong for acreage near Franklin. If we move now, we can get ahead of any downturn." "We?" "You know what I mean." "No," I said. "I don't," he sighed. That tired son sigh. The one that tries to make a father feel unreasonable for requiring plain language. Cedar Hollow is family property. It is trust property. Another silence. Then Marissa's voice came from somewhere near him, sharp and low. "Don't let him derail this." Daniel covered the phone badly. I heard enough. He came back. "Dad, we're trying to help. We already spoke with a title company. There may be a way to structure it with your lifetime interest accounted for, but you need to cooperate." I leaned against the porch rail. "What title company?" "Heritage Title in Cool Springs." "What broker?" "Dad." "What broker, Daniel?" "Brad Lohman, Cumberland Ridge Realty." I knew Brad Lohman. Not well. He had played baseball with Daniel in high school and grown into the kind of man who wore fleece vests with his company logo and laughed too loudly in restaurants. "Did you sign anything?" I asked. Daniel hesitated. That hesitation was the first answer. "Marissa signed a preliminary listing consultation agreement. Marissa does not own Cedar Hollow. She's acting on behalf of the family. A man who is trying to help asks first." "Don't do that," he snapped. "Don't turn this into some moral lecture. We have a buyer willing to come in strong. Cash, no contingencies. They'd let you stay through the summer." "Let me," I repeated. His voice hardened. "You have until Friday to meet with us and sign a cooperation acknowledgement. If you refuse, Marissa thinks we may need to petition for a conservatorship review. Nobody wants that." There it was, the cruel deadline, the polite gun on the table. I heard Eleanor's voice from years before. "She sees love as access." I said, "Put Marissa on." A muffled exchange. Then her voice arrived smooth as a polished knife. "Walter, I know this is emotional. Do you?" We all loved Eleanor, but she would not want you rotting in that house alone. I looked through the kitchen window at the chair where my wife had folded laundry, shelled peas, written grocery lists, held our grandson, and forgotten my name for the first time with tears in her eyes. Don't use my wife as a crowbar. Her breathing changed. You are making this harder than it needs to be. Where is Evan? That has nothing to do with this. It has everything to do with this. He is a child. He does not need to be dragged into adult financial matters. He wrote a letter at school. The line went dead quiet. Not confused quiet, caught quiet. Then Marissa said, "You had no right to contact his school." "I didn't. He is not available to you right now." "Why?" "Because your behavior is becoming unstable." I almost smiled, not because anything was funny, because there are phrases people rehearse, and that one had been polished. My behavior. Yes, the calls, the gifts, the obsession with seeing him, the refusal to discuss reasonable estate planning. Estate planning was completed years ago. That old trust, she said, and there it was again. The slip people make when they know more than they should. Walter, documents can be challenged. So can motives. She exhaled through her nose. Friday, 3 o'clock. Heritage title. If you don't come, we move forward without you. Marissa, I said. What? Bring every document you think gives you authority. She gave a small laugh. Gladly. After she hung up, I stood there for a long time with the phone in my hand. If she had stopped there, maybe things would have ended differently. But greed has a way of making people careless. The next morning, I drove my 2004 Ford F-150 into Franklin. The truck had 218,000 miles on it, a cracked dashboard, and an engine that still turned over because I maintained what I loved. It was cold enough that frost clung to the shaded fences along Del Rio Pike. I passed subdivisions where pastures used to be, and brick entrance signs with names like The Preserve and Hollow Creek Estates, built on land that had once preserved and hollowed without marketing help. Ruth Ann's office smelled like coffee and old paper. Her paralegal, Denise, greeted me with a look that told me she already knew not to make small talk. Ruth Ann sat behind her desk wearing a charcoal blazer, reading glasses low on her nose. Start at the beginning, she said. I told her about the school call, Daniel's call, Marissa's threat, heritage title, Brad Lohman. The conservatorship language. Ruth Ann listened without interrupting, making notes in blue ink. When I finished, she said, "They're moving faster than I expected." You expected this? I expected some version of it. She removed her glasses. Eleanor did too. That hurt in a place I was not ready for. I looked down at my hands. They looked older in her office. Can Marissa petition for conservatorship? Anyone can file almost anything. Winning is different. You have no diagnosis of incapacity. Your physician's letter from last year is clean. You pay your bills, maintain property, drive, manage accounts, and you had capacity when the trust was executed. A threat is not a case. What about the property? She cannot sell what she does not own. Daniel cannot sell what he does not own. They can create noise, pressure a buyer, maybe induce a broker to act foolishly. But heritage title cannot close without proper authority, trustee consent, and clean title. She said documents can be challenged. Ruth Ann smiled, but not warmly. They can try. She stood and walked to a file cabinet. From the bottom drawer, she pulled a duplicate binder of the Hollis Family Preservation Trust. Then a smaller folder I had not seen in years. Walter, I want you to understand something. The trust includes a no-contest provision, yes. It includes beneficiary conduct clauses, yes. But the stronger piece is not punishment. It is control. You are the primary trustee during your life. I am successor trustee if you become incapacitated. Daniel is not. Marissa is never. Evan's interest is protected separately. I nodded. She opened another document. This is the certificate of trust recorded with Williamson County. It does not reveal all assets, but it establishes the trust's existence and trustee authority. This is the conservation restriction recorded on the lower acreage. This is the occupancy agreement granting you exclusive lifetime residential use. This is the memorandum Eleanor insisted we record after the diagnosis but before capacity became questionable. I remembered that day vaguely. Eleanor in a green cardigan, rain on Ruth Ann's windows, a notary stamp, my wife asking twice whether Evan would still be able to walk to the creek. What memorandum? Ruth Ann slid it across the desk. The title read, Memorandum of Intent Regarding Preservation of Cedar Hollow and Grandchild Beneficiary Protections. My throat tightened. It states, Ruth Ann said, that Eleanor Hollis and Walter Hollis intended Cedar Hollow to remain available for Walter's lifetime and eventually benefit Evan under the trust structure, not be liquidated for Daniel or any spouse's personal debts. Personal debts? Ruth Ann looked at me carefully. Have you reviewed Daniel and Marissa's public records lately? No. I did a preliminary check this morning after your call. There are 2 civil judgments against Marissa's Boutique Design LLC in Davidson County. 1 tax lien released last year. 1 current UCC filing tied to business equipment. Their Spring Hill house has a second mortgage recorded in September. The room went very still. How much? I don't know all of it yet. Enough to explain urgency. I sat back. Money trouble has a smell. I had missed it because I had been smelling grief. Ruth Ann tapped the folder. Now about Evan's letter. If the school documents that he is being told you are angry with him because of an inheritance, that matters. Not because grandparents have automatic rights in every situation. Tennessee grandparent visitation law is specific and fact-dependent. But as trustee managing a beneficiary interest, you have a separate reason to document interference and potential emotional manipulation tied to trust assets. She told him I was angry because of something Eleanor left him. That is not just cruel, Ruth Ann said. It may be evidence. I stared at the sealed blue envelope in the folder, Eleanor's letter. Ruth Ann noticed. Not yet, she said. Why? Because once we use it, we use it. Let them show us their cards first. That was when my lawyer smiled. Not a big smile. Just a slight movement at the corner of her mouth, the kind that made me grateful she was on my side. What do you want me to do? I asked. Go to Heritage Title on Friday. I looked at her. You want me to go? Yes. Calmly. Say little. Sign nothing. Bring me with you. Will they let you in? They invited the trustee. The trustee may bring counsel. She closed the folder. And Walter? Yes. Do not warn them. The days before Friday moved slowly. On Wednesday, Brad Lohman left a voicemail. Mr. Hollis. Hey sir, this is Brad Lohman with Cumberland Ridge Realty. Hope you're doing well. Daniel asked me to reach out. We've got some exciting possibilities for Cedar Hollow, and I think once you see the numbers, you're going to feel a lot better about transitioning into a more manageable situation. Give me a shout. Transitioning. People use soft words when hard words would expose them. I saved the voicemail. On Thursday, a white SUV turned into my driveway at 2:17 p.m. I watched from the front window as a woman in sunglasses stepped out and took pictures of the house with her phone. A man in a navy jacket walked toward the barn, holding a tablet. I opened the front door. Can I help you? The woman froze. The man lifted a hand in that friendly trespasser way people do when they know being friendly is cheaper than being honest. Mr. Hollis? I'm Graham Pike. This is my associate, Laura. We're just doing an exterior preview. For whom? He glanced at the woman. Potential buyer group. Who authorized you to enter my property? We were told the family was expecting us. The family is standing on the porch. His smile twitched. Sir, we're not here to cause trouble. Then leave before you do. Laura lowered her phone. Graham tried again. We understood there was a listing coming. You understood wrong. I took out my phone and photographed their license plate. His friendliness disappeared. That's unnecessary. No, I said. It's documentation. They left in a hurry, gravel kicking under their tires. At 2:31, Marissa texted me for the first time in 7 months. Don't embarrass Daniel tomorrow. This can be dignified if you allow it. I typed nothing. At 2:44. Daniel texted, please just hear the offer. We're drowning. He deleted it before the minute was up. But my phone had already captured the notification. Drowning, there was the truth, breaking the surface. I printed the screenshot. On Friday, January 10, the sky over Cool Springs was low and gray. The kind of winter sky that makes every office building look like a medical bill. Heritage Title occupied the second floor of a brick building between a dental practice and a wealth management office. I arrived 15 minutes early in my dark suit, the same navy tie I had worn to Eleanor's funeral, and my polished black shoes. Ruth Ann arrived 5 minutes later carrying a leather briefcase. You all right? She asked. No. Good. Means you're awake. Inside, the receptionist smiled too brightly. You must be here for the Hollis meeting. I am Walter Hollis. Her eyes flicked toward Ruth Ann. My attorney, Ruth Ann Bledsoe. The smile stiffened. Of course. They put us in a conference room with a long walnut table, a glass wall, and a tray of bottled water nobody touched. I sat facing the door. Old habit. Ruth Ann sat to my right. At 3:02, Daniel came in wearing a gray sport coat I did not recognize. He had lost weight in the face. His eyes moved quickly, then fell away from mine. Marissa entered behind him, cream coat over her shoulders, gold necklace bright at her throat, phone in hand. Brad Lohman came next, carrying a folder and wearing the expression of a man who expected commission. Then a title officer introduced herself as Karen Whitcomb. She was in her 50s, composed, with reading glasses hanging from a chain. Behind her came a man I did not know. "Graham Pike," he said, avoiding my eyes. "The trespasser," I said. The room chilled. Marissa set her purse down. "Walter, please." Ruth Ann opened her notebook. Karen cleared her throat. This meeting was requested to discuss a potential transaction involving the Cedar Hollow property and to identify what authority would be required for any transfer. "My understanding is that there may be family agreement pending." "There is not," Ruth Ann said. Brad shifted in his chair. Marissa leaned forward. "We're here because Mr. Hollis has been resistant to reasonable planning. Daniel is his only child. We are trying to prevent a crisis." Ruth Ann looked at her. "What crisis?" Marissa blinked. "The crisis of an elderly man living alone on nearly 20 acres with no realistic maintenance plan and no clear transition." "My client has a maintenance plan," Ruth Ann said. "He also has a trust." Brad opened his folder. "Right, and that's why we wanted everyone here. There's a very strong buyer who understands there may be some trust mechanics. They're willing to work creatively." "Creatively," Ruth Ann repeated. Graham Pike folded his hands. "Our group is prepared to offer $3.2 million for the full acreage, subject to title review and development feasibility." Daniel looked at me then, unable to hide the desperate hope in his face. $3.2 million once. That number would have seemed impossible to the young couple patching roof leaks with borrowed tools. Now it sat on the table like bait. Karin, the title officer, looked at me. "Mr. Hollis, have you agreed to list or sell the property?" "No." Her pen stopped. Brad laughed lightly. "We're early in the process." "Did you advertise or present the property to potential buyers?" Ruth Ann asked. Brad's cheeks reddened. "Not formally, informally? I had conversations. Based on whose authority?" Daniel said, "Mine." Ruth Ann turned to him. "And what is your ownership interest in Cedar Hollow?" He swallowed. "I'm the beneficiary, current or contingent." Marissa cut in. "This is exactly the kind of technical intimidation we were trying to avoid." Ruth Ann did not raise her voice. "Mrs. Hollis, what document did you sign with Mr. Lohman?" Marissa lifted her chin. "A consultation agreement." Brad looked down. Ruth Ann slid a paper from her briefcase and placed it on the table. "This one?" Brad stared. "Where did you get that?" "Your assistant emailed it to Heritage Title." Heritage Title forwarded materials to my office this morning after learning Mr. Hollis was represented. Karen's lips pressed together. "I saw Marissa's fingers tighten around her phone," Ruth Ann continued. "This document identifies Marissa Hollis as authorized family representative for Cedar Hollow Farm and authorizes preliminary marketing, buyer outreach, valuation discussions, and preparation of listing materials. It includes Mr. Lohman's brokerage letterhead and Mrs. Hollis's electronic signature." Brad said, "It's not a listing agreement." "No," Ruth Ann said. "It is a written admission that you solicited buyer interest in property your client did not own or have authority to represent." The room went silent. Chair legs scraped as Graham Pike leaned back. Marissa said, "Daniel authorized me." "Daniel had no authority either. He is Walter's son." "That is a relationship," Ruth Ann said, "not a deed." Karen looked at Daniel. "Mr. Hollis, do you have power of attorney for your father?" "No, but any trustee appointment?" "No." "Court order?" "No." Ruth Ann opened the trust binder. "Walter Hollis is sole acting trustee. He has exclusive lifetime residential occupancy under recorded trust terms. The lower acreage is subject to a conservation restriction. No sale can occur without trustee action, beneficiary compliance, and satisfaction of recorded restrictions. Additionally, any attempt by a beneficiary or related party to force, coerce, fraudulently market, or interfere with the trustee's occupancy triggers disinheritance limitations under Article 7. Marissa gave a brittle laugh. "You can't disinherit Daniel because we had a conversation." Ruth Ann looked at her for a long second. "No, Eleanor and Walter already did." Daniel's face changed. It was not anger first, it was fear. Ruth Ann placed another document on the table. "This is the executed trust. This is the recorded certificate. This is the memorandum of intent. This is the occupancy agreement. This is the conservation restriction. This is the beneficiary conduct clause." Karen put on her reading glasses. Brad whispered, "Jesus." Marissa shot him a look. Ruth Ann turned one page. Article 7, Section C. Any beneficiary, spouse of beneficiary, agent or person, acting in concert with a beneficiary, who attempts to compel sale of trust real property during Walter Hollis's lifetime, interfere with his occupancy, misrepresent authority to market trust property, or use allegations of incapacity as leverage without medical evidence shall be deemed to have predeceased the settlers for purposes of discretionary distributions, except for a nominal distribution of $1. Daniel pushed back from the table. Dad? His voice cracked on the word. I had waited 3 days to hear him say it like a son. I said nothing. Marissa stood. This is absurd. That clause would never hold up. Ruth Ann's face remained calm. You're welcome to test it. Graham Pike closed his portfolio. Our group is withdrawing interest pending legal clarity. Sit down, Marissa snapped. He looked at her as if seeing her clearly for the first time. No. Brad rubbed his forehead. I need to call my broker. Karen gathered the papers slowly. Heritage Title will not proceed on this matter. I will also need to note that no authorized seller consent exists. Marissa looked at Daniel. Say something. Daniel was staring at the documents. Dad, he said again. You are going to leave me $1? Ruth Ann answered before I could. No. You were going to receive trust benefits if you honored the plan. You moved first. I finally spoke. You thought I was old. You forgot I was careful. Nobody moved. Marissa's eyes flashed. You're enjoying this? No, I said. That is the part you will never understand. She grabbed her purse. This is not over. Ruth Ann closed the binder. You are correct. It is not. That was the first reveal. The smaller one. If you've ever had family treat your kindness like weakness, you'll understand why I stayed quiet. Because the hardest part of that afternoon was not watching Marissa lose control. It was watching Daniel understand that the door he had kicked was the same one I had planned to leave open. He followed me into the hallway while Marissa argued with Brad near the elevator. Dad, wait. I stopped by a framed print of downtown Franklin. Daniel's face looked gray. Is it true? Which part? The $1, yes. His mouth trembled. Because we tried to sell. Because you threatened to call me incompetent unless I cooperated. Because you let your wife hide my grandson from me. Because you discussed my home with strangers before you discussed it with your father. He looked down. We're in trouble. I know. His eyes lifted sharply. You know? I know enough. He swallowed. Marissa's business failed. There were loans. I thought we could fix it before anyone knew. With my house, with our family asset. My home, I said. He flinched. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Where is Evan? Daniel looked toward the conference room. He's safe. That was not my question. His eyes filled, but he blinked it back. Marissa thought it would confuse him to keep seeing you while we were trying to figure out the estate. The estate? I know. No, Daniel, you do not. An estate belongs to the dead. I am alive. He pressed his lips together like a boy trying not to cry. Dad, I messed up. Yes, can we fix it? I looked at the son I had raised, the son Eleanor had rocked through fever, the son who had let his wife tell a 10-year-old boy that his grandfather was angry over money. I don't know, I said. That depends on what you do when fixing it costs you something. Marissa came down the hall, then Daniel now. He went. That was the moment I knew my son was not the engine of the betrayal. He was the weak axles. Marissa was driving, but weakness still leaves tracks. The next 2 weeks were a study in controlled chaos. Ruth Ann sent formal notices to Daniel, Marissa, Brad Lohman, Cumberland Ridge Realty, Heritage Title, and Graham Pike's Acquisition Group. Not threats, notices. Precise dated certified notices stating the trust's ownership, my trustee authority, lack of consent, preservation restrictions, and demand to cease all marketing, entry, representation, or discussion of Cedar Hollow as available for sale. Brad's managing broker called Ruth Ann within 4 hours. By Monday, Brad sent me an apology email drafted so carefully it might as well have been written with oven mitts. He claimed he had misunderstood family authority and had not publicly listed the property. Ruth Ann filed a complaint anyway with the Tennessee Real Estate Commission. Not because we wanted to ruin him, but because professionals are supposed to verify authority before chasing commission. Graham Pike's attorney responded that his client had acted in good faith based on representations from Marissa and Brad. Ruth Ann agreed to stand down, provided he signed an acknowledgement that no negotiations existed and destroyed all photographs and due diligence materials. He signed, Marissa did not. Instead, she escalated. On January 21, a packet arrived by certified mail from a law firm in Nashville. The letterhead read Strickland, Hayes, and Monroe. It alleged concern regarding my mental capacity, unsafe living conditions, isolation, possible undue influence by attorney Ruth Ann Bledsoe, and mismanagement of trust assets. It requested voluntary medical evaluation, financial disclosure to Daniel as primary family stakeholder, and mediation regarding appropriate transition of real property. Ruth Ann read it in her office while I sat across from her. When she finished, she said, "They found a lawyer willing to write adjectives. Is it serious?" "It is paper. We answer paper with better paper." She drafted a response attaching my recent physical, a letter from my primary physician, tax payment records, insurance policies, property maintenance invoices, trust accounting summaries, and photographs of the house, barn, and grounds dated within the week. Then she added the school counselor's report. By then, Angela Porter had met with me in person. I did not see Evan. The school could not simply hand him to me. But Angela, with appropriate caution, confirmed that Evan's letter had been scanned into his student support file. She could not give me the original without procedure, but she documented that Evan expressed distress over being prevented from contacting a previously close grandparent and confusion about inheritance-related statements made at home. The letter itself broke me when I finally read a copy through Ruth Ann's lawful request. It was written in pencil on lined paper, "Dear Granddad Walt. My teacher said, write to someone who makes you feel brave. I picked you, but Mom says I can't send letters to your house because it makes things worse. I don't know what I did. Mom said Nana's son left something and you got mad because Dad needed it. I would give it back if I had it. I just want to come to the creek again. I still have the wooden bird. Please don't be mad at me. Love, even P.S. If this letter gets sent, please don't call Mom. She checks my backpack." I read that letter once in Ruth Ann's office and then handed it back because my hands were shaking too much to hold it. There are kinds of cruelty money cannot explain. Ruth Ann's voice softened. "Walter, we may need to consider a petition regarding grandparent visitation. I don't want to drag him through court. No good adult wants that. But he is already being dragged through something." That night, I sat in Eleanor's chair with the blue envelope in my lap. For when they forget what family means, I did not open it. Not yet. Marissa's lawyer filed first, not a full conservatorship petition. They were not ready for that. Instead, they filed a petition in Williamson County Chancery Court seeking trust accounting, review of trustee conduct, and temporary restrictions on asset dissipation. It was a fishing expedition dressed as concern. They claimed Daniel had a legitimate beneficiary interest and reason to worry I might transfer or waste assets under the influence of grief, old age, and my attorney. Ruth Ann almost laughed when she read that part. "Asset dissipation," she said. "You still drive a truck old enough to vote." The hearing was set for February 18 at the Williamson County Judicial Center. In the meantime, Marissa made one more mistake. She called my bank. First Bank on Columbia Avenue had held my accounts for years. The branch manager, Tom Alvarez, had known Eleanor and me since before his hair turned gray. Marissa called asking whether Daniel, as my only child, could receive information about trust accounts because of concerns about elder exploitation. Tom did not give her anything. He did call me. "Walter," he said, "I thought you should know." I drove there the next morning. Tom met me in a glass-walled office with a view of the teller line. He wore a navy suit and the expression of a man who disliked being used as a tool. "She sounded polished," he said. "But polished isn't authorization." "Did she mention Evan?" "No. She mentioned Daniel's beneficiary rights several times." Ruth Ann added Tom's written summary to the file. Every lie was becoming a brick, not thrown stacked. On February 18, the courthouse hallway smelled like wet coats and floor wax. Rain had been falling since dawn, cold and steady, streaking the tall windows. I wore the same navy suit again. Ruth Ann stood beside me, reviewing notes. Daniel sat on a bench down the hall, elbows on knees. Marissa stood near him, typing furiously. Their attorney, a narrow man named Preston Hayes, wore a pinstripe suit and confidence that looked rented. When Daniel glanced at me, I saw exhaustion. When Marissa glanced at me, I saw calculation. We went into Judge Caroline Mercer's courtroom at 9:03 a.m. Chancery Court is not like television. No shouting. No dramatic objections every 20 seconds. Just wood benches, microphones, papers, and a judge who has heard enough family greed to recognize its accent. Preston Hayes spoke first. He painted me as isolated, grieving, resistant, possibly manipulated by Ruth Ann, and unwilling to communicate with my son regarding substantial family assets. He said Daniel was not trying to force a sale, only seeking transparency and protection. Ruth Ann took notes without expression. Then Preston made the mistake of mentioning Eleanor. Mrs. Hollis, before her passing, intended the family property to benefit the next generation. My client merely wishes to ensure that intention is not frustrated. Ruth Ann looked up, slowly. When it was her turn, she stood with one folder. Your Honor, this petition is not about transparency. It is about leverage. The trust instrument provides accounting mechanisms, and Mr. Hollis has complied with all trustee obligations. What has occurred instead is a coordinated attempt by a beneficiary, his spouse, and a real estate agent to market trust property without authority, threaten an elderly trustee with incapacity allegations unless he cooperated, interfere with a minor trust beneficiary's relationship with his grandfather, and then reframe the resulting documentation as evidence of Mr. Hollis' instability. Judge Mercer's face did not change, but her pen stopped. Ruth Ann submitted the heritage title materials, the unauthorized consultation agreement, Brad's apology email, the buyer withdrawal, the bank call summary, my physician letter, and the school counselor documentation under seal where appropriate. Preston objected to the school material. Judge Mercer reviewed it privately. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear rain tapping the windows. Daniel stared at the table. Marissa stared at the judge. When Judge Mercer looked up, her tone cooled by several degrees. Mr. Hayes, did your client or his spouse authorize a real estate professional to present trust property to prospective buyers without trustee consent? Preston adjusted his glasses. Your Honor, there were preliminary discussions only. That was not my question. He conferred with Marissa in whispers. Daniel closed his eyes. Finally, Preston said, there may have been preliminary outreach. Judge Mercer turned to Daniel. Mr. Hollis, do you hold power of attorney for your father? No, Mom. Are you trustee? No, Mom. Do you have any current possessory ownership interest in Cedar Hollow? Daniel's voice dropped. No, Mom. She looked at Marissa. Mrs. Hollis, on what basis did you sign as authorized family representative? Marissa's mouth opened. For once, no polished answer came. I was trying to help my family. Judge Mercer held her gaze. Helping does not create authority. Ruth Ann then requested dismissal of the petition. Confirmation of trustee authority. An order prohibiting unauthorized contact with third parties regarding trust assets, and preservation of evidence relevant to beneficiary conduct, Preston argued. Poorly. Judge Mercer dismissed most of the petition that day and set a limited review only for standard trust accounting, which Ruth Ann had already prepared. She warned Daniel and Marissa that further misrepresentation of authority could expose them to sanctions and civil liability. She did not rule on the no-contest consequences immediately because that would require a separate trustee determination and possible beneficiary notice process. But the message landed. As we left the courtroom, Marissa walked close enough to whisper, "You turned a family issue into a public humiliation." I looked at her. No, I kept a private betrayal from becoming a theft. Her face hardened. You'll never see Evan if I can help it. Daniel heard it, so did Ruth Ann, so did. Unfortunately for Marissa, the court officer standing beside the door, Ruth Ann stopped walking. Mrs. Hollis, she said quietly. Thank you. Marissa blinked. For what? For clarity. That was the second mistake. 3 days later, Ruth Ann filed a petition seeking court-ordered grandparent visitation based on the prior substantial relationship, Evan's documented distress, Eleanor's death, and Marissa's explicit threat to withhold access as leverage. Tennessee law is not simple on grandparent visitation. Ruth Ann explained that to me again and again. Parents have rights. Courts do not lightly interfere. We had to show more than sadness. We had to show harm or risk of substantial emotional harm from severing a significant existing relationship under recognized circumstances. I can't promise outcome, she told me. I know. What I can promise is that we have more documentation than most people bring. Because I had written things down, every canceled visit, every returned card, every unanswered call, every text, every time Evan had previously stayed overnight, photographs, calendars, birthday receipts, school letter, court hallway threat. Engineering teaches you that a bridge does not fail from one crack. It fails from stress ignored over time. So do families. The hearing on visitation was scheduled for March 27. Between February and March, Daniel called me 6 times. I answered once. It was a Sunday evening. The sky was turning purple over the pasture, and I had just finished feeding the stray orange cat Eleanor used to pretend not to love. Dad, Daniel said, can we talk? We are talking, he breathed out. I moved into the guest room. I said nothing. Marissa's furious. She says you're trying to take Evan from us. I'm trying to keep him from believing I abandoned him. I know. Do you? His voice cracked. I found the wooden bird in his sock drawer. That one sentence opened something in me. He kept it? Wrapped in a t-shirt. I sat down on the porch step, Daniel continued. He thought you were mad at him. Dad, he cried when I told him you weren't. I closed my eyes. Why did you let her tell him that? I didn't know exactly what she'd said. That is not an answer. I was ashamed, he said. I knew we needed money. I knew she was pushing. I told myself keeping Evan away was temporary until things settled. Then the property thing got bigger, and every time I thought about calling you, I heard what you'd say. What would I say? The truth. Ween moved through the cedars. Daniel, debt is a hole. Pride is the shovel. He made a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. I'm sorry. I believe you are. Does that fix anything? No. A long silence followed, then he said, What did Mom leave Evan? That question told me Marissa had never understood the trust. She had built an entire war around shadows. Love, I said. Dad. She left him protection, from what? I looked toward the creek. From adults who confuse needing money with deserving it. He did not argue. Before hanging up, he said, I'll tell the court I want Evan to see you. That may cost you. I know. Do you? This time he answered like a man. Yes. March 27 arrived bright and windy. Bradford pear trees bloomed white along the courthouse parking lot, smelling sweet and rotten at the same time. Ruth Ann and I met inside. Daniel arrived alone. Marissa came 10 minutes later with Preston Hayes and a woman I assumed was a family law attorney. Evan was not in court. I was grateful the hearing was closed for sensitive matters. Angela Porter testified by subpoena about Evan's letter and his emotional distress. She did not exaggerate. She did not take sides. She simply stated what she had observed. Daniel testified next. He looked smaller on the witness stand. He admitted Evan had spent substantial time with me and Eleanor before her death. He admitted contact had been restricted. He admitted financial stress influenced discussions about Cedar Hollow. He admitted Marissa had been the primary person controlling Evan's communication with me. He admitted he had failed to intervene sooner. When Marissa testified, she performed concern. Walter was grieving. Walter was intense. Walter sent too many cards. Walter talked about Eleanor too much. Walter might confuse Evan. Walter's house was old. Walter's attachment was unhealthy. Ruth Ann cross-examined her gently, which was worse than aggression. Mrs. Hollis, did you tell Evan that his grandfather was angry with him because of something Eleanor left him? I don't recall phrasing it that way. Did you tell him his grandfather was upset about inheritance matters? I may have tried to explain adult conflict in child-appropriate language. Did you check his backpack? I'm his mother. Did you prevent him from sending letters? I monitored communication. Did you tell Walter Hollis outside this courthouse? You'll never see Evan if I can help it. Marissa's face changed. I was emotional. Did you say it? I may have. Were you also emotional when you signed a document representing yourself as authorized family representative for property you did not own? Preston objected. The judge allowed limited questioning as it related to motive. Marissa's polish cracked. That property was supposed to be for family. For Evan? Ruth Ann asked. For all of us. Is Evan included in all of us when he asks to see his grandfather? Marissa looked away. That was the first time I saw her lose not the argument, but the mask. Judge Mercer did not give me everything. Courts rarely do. But she granted structured visitation, 2 Saturday visits per month at Cedar Hollow for 6 months, with phone contact once a week, subject to review. She ordered both parents not to disparage me or discuss inheritance disputes with Evan. She encouraged family counseling. It was not victory in the loud sense. It was a door reopened. The first Saturday Evan came back to Cedar Hollow. I nearly broke before he reached the porch. Daniel drove him. Marissa did not come. Evan stepped out of the car wearing a blue hoodie, taller than I remembered, thinner in the shoulders, holding something in his right hand. The wooden bird, for a second. Neither of us moved. Then he ran. I went down one knee because old men cannot always catch love standing up. He hit me hard enough to hurt, arms around my neck, face buried in my shoulder. I thought you were mad, he whispered. I held him and looked over his head at Daniel, who stood by the truck with tears on his face. No, I said into my grandson's hair. Never at you. We spent that afternoon doing ordinary things, which is how healing often begins. We made grilled cheese. We walked to the creek. He skipped a stone badly and laughed for the first time. He asked if Nana Son's flowers would come back. They always do, I told him. Before he left, he stood in Eleanor's old garden and said, Dad says there's court stuff. Yes. Is it because of me? No. It is because adults forgot how to be adults. He considered that. Mom says you're trying to punish her. I knelt slowly in front of him. Even, consequences are not always punishment. Sometimes they are fences. They keep people from walking into places where they can hurt others. Like the creek fence? Exactly like that. He nodded. Children understand truth when adults stop decorating it. After he left, I walked into the paper cave and opened the trust binder again. There was still the bigger matter. Daniel's beneficiary status, Marissa's interference, the no contest clause, and Eleanor's sealed letter. Ruth Ann scheduled a trustee determination meeting for April 16 at her office. Daniel, Marissa, their counsel, the guardian ad litem appointed for Evan's limited trust interests, and Tom Alvarez as trust banking witness were notified. The purpose was not courtroom drama. It was formal trust administration. Determine whether beneficiary conduct clauses had been triggered, update distribution plans, review the Columbia Commercial Lot Subtrust, and address Evan's protections. Marissa almost did not attend. Then she learned there were assets beyond Cedar Hollow. That brought her. On April 16, rain returned. Of course it did. Some stories know their weather. Ruth Ann's conference room was full by 10 a.m. Daniel sat at one end, pale but present. Marissa sat beside Preston Hayes, arms folded. A family law attorney sat behind her. The guardian ad litem, a calm woman named Rebecca Nance, sat with a yellow legal pad. Tom Alvarez sat near the wall. Denise arranged water bottles no one opened. I sat across from Marissa with Eleanor's blue envelope in front of me. Ruth Ann began. This meeting concerns administration of the Hollis Family Preservation Trust and related subtrusts. We will review beneficiary conduct, trust assets, and proposed trustee actions. Marissa leaned back. We dispute any attempt to remove Daniel. Noted, Ruth Ann said. Daniel looked at the table. Ruth Ann distributed a summary, not the full trust. Just permitted disclosures. Marissa scanned the first page impatiently. Then she reached page 3. Her expression sharpened. What is the Carter Road commercial parcel? There it was, the bigger twist entering the room. Ruth Ann answered, a trust asset. I've never heard of it. You are not a beneficiary. She looked at Daniel. Did you know? Daniel shook his head slowly. Ruth Ann continued. The Carter Road parcel in Maury County was purchased by Walter Hollis in 1996 and transferred into trust planning in 2019. Recent appraisal values the parcel between $4.6 and $5.1 million due to commercial development potential. The room went so still, the rain sounded louder. Marissa's mouth opened slightly. Brad Lohman had chased Cedar Hollow. Marissa had threatened me over Cedar Hollow. Daniel had risked his inheritance over Cedar Hollow. And all along, the larger asset sat 30 miles south behind a chain-link fence and a faded sign that said no dumping. That property, Ruth Ann said, was designated primarily to fund Evan Hollis's education, health needs, and future distributions, with discretionary support to Daniel if all beneficiary conduct conditions were satisfied. Daniel covered his face with one hand. Marissa whispered, $5 million? I looked at her then, not with anger, with something colder and sadder. That was going to help your son. She turned on me. You hid it. From greed, I said. Ruth Ann slid another document forward. Under the trust, Daniel's conduct and conduct by his spouse acting in concert with him may trigger limitation of his discretionary beneficiary status. However, Walter has proposed an alternative. Marissa's eyes narrowed. What alternative? Ruth Ann read. Daniel Hollis may retain limited contingent beneficiary eligibility only if he executes a formal acknowledgement of breach, waives any claim to compel sale of Cedar Hollow or the Carter Road parcel during Walter's lifetime, participates in financial counseling, cooperates fully with Evan's visitation and counseling, and legally separates his personal debts from any trust expectations. Marissa Hollis is excluded from all trust information, influence, and access. Any further interference by either parent with Evan's protected relationship or trust interest triggers immediate reduction of Daniel's share to nominal distribution. Preston Hayes said, that is coercive. Rebecca Nance, the guardian ad litem, spoke for the first time. It sounds protective of the minor beneficiary. Marissa shot her a look. Rebecca did not blink. Daniel lowered his hand. What happens to Evan? Ruth Ann's voice softened. Evan remains protected. Educational trust, health support, counseling support, future stage distributions. The Carter Road parcel may be leased or sold later, depending on trustee judgment and market conditions. But proceeds stay protected for Evan's benefit and broader legacy planning. Marissa laughed once, bitterly. So Daniel gets punished and Walter plays saint. I reached for the blue envelope. The room shifted. Ruth Ann looked at me. Walter, are you sure? Yes. My fingers were steady when I opened it. Inside were 3 handwritten pages in Eleanor's slanted script. Her handwriting near the end had become uneven, but on that day it had still been hers. I read it aloud. Not all of it. Some words belonged only to me, but enough. My dear Walter, if this letter is being read, then something has gone wrong in the family. We tried so hard to love well. Daniel, if you are hearing this, please know first that I loved you before you took your first breath. Nothing in these papers means we stopped loving you. But love is not the same as permission. Cedar Hollow is not just land. It is the place your father gave his back to, the place I gave my years to, the place where your son learned what peace felt like. If you or anyone beside you tries to turn it into money before your father is ready, you are not preserving family. You are harvesting us. Marissa, I tried to see the best in you. I hope there is still good in you when this day comes. But if you use Evan as a rope to pull money from Walter, you will teach your son that love is a transaction. Please do not make him recover from his childhood. Evan must never be told he is the cause of adult conflict. He is the innocent part of this family. Walter and I built protection for him because children should not have to depend on the moods of desperate adults. Daniel, if you need help, ask honestly. Your father is stern, but he is not cruel. If you try to take, you will meet the part of him the world knows. If you ask, you may still find the part of him that held you when you were small. Walter, my love, do not let loneliness make you surrender what wisdom told us to protect. You will want peace. I know you. You will think giving in might bring them close. It will not. Anything purchased with surrender must be purchased again. Protect the boy. Protect the home. Protect your dignity. And when it hurts, sit by the creek and remember that I am not gone from the places where I was loved. Your Eleanor. By the time I finished, Daniel was crying openly, not dramatic crying, quiet, ruined crying. Marissa's face had gone pale, then red. That's manipulative, she said. Nobody answered her because some statements answer themselves. Daniel stood. Preston reached for his sleeve, but Daniel pulled away. He looked at me. I'll sign. Marissa turned Daniel. He did not look at her. I'll sign, he repeated, and I'll cooperate with Evan seeing Dad. You weak coward, she hissed. Daniel closed his eyes. Then, for the first time in years, my son spoke without asking permission from the room. No, Marissa. Weak was letting you convince me this was normal. She stared at him. He continued, voice shaking but clear. Weak was letting my son think his grandfather stopped loving him. Weak was walking into a title office, trying to sell my father's home, because I was too ashamed to admit we were broke. The rain hit the windows. I'm done being weak. Marissa grabbed her purse and walked out so hard the conference room door bounced against the stopper. No one followed. That was not the end. Real life rarely gives you a clean final scene. Marissa filed for divorce in June, not because of remorse, because Daniel stopped being useful in the way she preferred. Their finances were worse than I knew. Credit cards, business loans, a personal guarantee on a design studio lease, money borrowed from her mother, a second mortgage. Daniel had been drowning. Yes, but he had also helped dig the lake. The divorce was ugly but not spectacular. There were custody negotiations, counseling requirements, financial disclosures that made Daniel look foolish and Marissa look reckless. The court maintained my visitation with Evan and later expanded it modestly. After counseling reports showed the relationship was healthy and beneficial. Brad Lohman received a formal reprimand and a fine. He wrote me another apology, this one less polished. I accepted it, but did not absolve him of learning the lesson. Graham Pike disappeared from the story, which was the wisest thing he did. Daniel signed the trust acknowledgement. Ruth Ann structured it so that he did not receive direct money to pour into old debts. Instead, under strict conditions, the trust could pay for financial counseling and later limited emergency support if approved by an independent co-trustee after my death. It was not revenge. It was a guardrail. Marissa was excluded completely from trust communications. If Evan needed education funds, payments would go directly to institutions. If he needed counseling or medical support, payments would go directly to providers. No parent could use him as a mailbox for money. The Carter Road parcel was leased in late 2025 to a regional medical supply company under a long-term ground lease. Not sold, leased. Monthly income began flowing into the trust, quiet and steady like a creek underground. Evan's future education was fully funded before he turned 11. Cedar Hollow stayed mine, the conservation restriction held. The lower pasture could not become luxury townhomes. The creek remained shaded. The barn still leaned slightly east. The hydrangeas came back that spring like Eleanor promised through the soil. As for Daniel and me, that is harder to explain. We did not become one of those families who hug in a courtroom hallway and pretend betrayal was just a misunderstanding. I have no taste for false endings. He hurt me, he hurt his son, he dishonored his mother's memory. But he also stopped. Eventually, painfully, publicly, he stopped. That matters. He comes by twice a month now, sometimes with Evan, sometimes alone. At first, he stood awkwardly in the kitchen, like a contractor waiting for payment. Then one Saturday, he brought a toolbox and repaired the loose hinge on the barn door without asking. Another time, he sat on the porch and told me the truth about the debt. All of it. I did not rescue him. I did help him make a list. There is a difference. He works now for a building supply company in Colombia. Honest work, less flash, more tired hands. He attends counseling with Evan. He pays what he can. He apologizes without expecting the apology to erase the past. Sometimes I see the boy he was. Sometimes I see the man he might still become. Marissa moved to Nashville after the divorce proceedings began. Evan sees her under the custody plan. I do not speak badly of her to him. That is not mercy toward her. That is protection for him. A child should not have to carry adult poison just because someone offers it. Evan asked me, "Do you hate Mom?" We were sitting by Miller Creek, late afternoon sun broken across the water. I picked up a flat stone and turned it in my fingers. No, why not? Because hate is a room. Once you move in, you have to live there. He thought about that. Are you mad? Yes, for how long? As long as it takes to become wisdom. He nodded like that made sense. Maybe it did. By the summer of 2026, Evan had grown tall enough that I had to look twice when he crossed the yard. He still kept the wooden bird, though one wing had chipped. We made another together out of cedar from a fallen limb near the lower fence. On July 4, Daniel came over with hamburgers, and Evan helped me hang a new flag on the porch. The old one had faded. I should have replaced it sooner. The three of us stood there in the heat, while cicadas screamed from the trees and smoke from somebody's grill drifted over the ridge. Daniel looked at the house. I almost lost this, he said. I knew he did not mean the boards. Yes, I said. He swallowed. I almost lost you. I looked at my son, older than he should have looked, younger than his mistakes had made him seem. You did lose something, I said. But not everything. His eyes shone. That was as close to forgiveness as I could honestly give that day. And honesty is the only foundation worth building on. Sometimes people ask why I went to all that trouble years before. Why Eleanor and I paid lawyers, recorded documents, structured trusts, wrote letters, preserved land, named trustees, and planned for ugliness we hoped would never come. The answer is simple. Love without boundaries becomes an invitation to the wrong people. I loved my son. I loved my daughter-in-law as much as she allowed herself to be loved. I loved my grandson more than my own comfort. But I also learned that love cannot require blindness. A father can open his door without handing over the deed. A grandfather can fight for a child without turning that child into a weapon. An old man can be gentle and still be prepared. The world mistakes quiet for empty. It is not. Quiet is where records are kept. Quiet is where patterns are noticed. Quiet is where a man who has survived war, grief, marriage, fatherhood, dementia, death, and loneliness learns not to spend his strength proving he still has it. On the first anniversary of the school phone call, I drove to Clover Ridge Elementary with permission and met Angela Porter in the front office. I brought a small basket of blueberry muffins from Meridee's downtown and a handwritten thank you card. She tried to tell me she had only done her job. I told her sometimes doing your job is the hinge on which a child's life turns. Then I drove back to Cedar Hollow. The sky was clear that day, cold but bright. I parked the old Ford by the barn and walked down to the creek with Eleanor's letter in my coat pocket. Not the original, that stayed in Ruth Ann's office, but a copy I had made for myself. I sat on the flat limestone rock where Eleanor used to rest when the walk tired her. The water moved over brown leaves. Somewhere beyond the cedars, a hammer sounded from a new subdivision going up on land somebody else had sold. Progress, they call it. Maybe sometimes it is. I unfolded Eleanor's letter and read the last line again. I am not gone from the places where I was loved. For a long time I listened to the creek, then I heard footsteps behind me. Evan came down the path carrying 2 bottles of root beer and a paper bag. Dad said you were here, he said. What's in the bag? Cookies. I made them. Well, Dad helped, but he burned the first ones. I smiled. That sounds like your father. Evan sat beside me and handed me a bottle. For a while we did not talk. That is one of the gifts of family when it is healthy. Silence does not feel like punishment. Then he said, Granddad Walt, yes? When I'm older, will this place still be here? I looked across the creek, up through the cedar shadows, toward the house Eleanor and I had built a life around. If I have anything to say about it, I told him. Yes. He leaned against my shoulder. You always have something to say. I laughed softly. Not always. He looked up at me. But when it matters, I put my arm around him and watched sunlight catch the water. I thought about Marissa and her cream coat, Daniel in that title office with his face going pale, Brad Lohman closing his folder, Judge Mercer's pen stopping, Ruth Ann's quiet smile, Eleanor's shaking signature. A school counselor brave enough to make a phone call, a little boy writing a letter he was afraid to send, and I thought about how close greed came to turning love into paperwork. Maybe that is what aging gives a man if he lets it. Not bitterness, not softness, clarity. You learn that money can reveal people, but it cannot replace them. You learn that family names on legal documents mean very little if family conduct does not match. You learn that some doors must stay open, some gates must be locked, and some lessons only arrive after everyone has shown who they are or something valuable is on the table. I never wanted to beat my family. I wanted them to remember what Eleanor and I had built. When they forgot, I let the truth remind them. Now, most evenings I sit on the porch in the chair beside the empty one. Daniel's truck sometimes comes up the lane. Evan's bike leans against the hydrangeas. The barn still needs paint. The taxes still come every October. The old Ford still starts on the second turn when the weather is cold. And on clear nights, when the ridge goes quiet and the creek speaks from the dark, I can almost hear Eleanor humming through the cedars. Some men leave behind money. I decided to leave behind a lesson.